Just waiting.
Everyone has a story to tell. Shining a light on stories that uplift us, that change us, that inspire us. The Yogi Hour. Listen, be inspired. Hello, and welcome back to the Yogi Hour. This is our third broadcast. And this week we have a very interesting person. A friend of mine who I've known the last couple of years. Her name is Karunesvari. Hello, welcome Karunesvari.
Hello, hi John.
How are you?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
Good. Karunesvari, it's lovely having you on the show. And I guess I wanted to start by just asking you about your time in Krishna consciousness. See, you grew up in Belfast, and kind of Belfast is known for Catholic and Protestant, but you kind of ventured into something completely different. It's just known as Krishna consciousness. It's known for better known as Hare Krishna. So I just wanted to kind of get a kind of background on that and kind of how that's been for you.
Yeah, sure.
Really, what got you started in it?
Sure. I was born in Belfast. I only spent the first 8 years of my life there, and then my family moved to Bangor, which is about just 10 or 12 miles away, and has quite a different mood altogether. It's much more removed from the intensity of what was going on in Belfast at the time. It was much more peaceful, but still, it was mostly Protestant, the area that I lived in, and Bangor in general actually was mostly Protestant. I went to an all-girls school for secondary school. There was about 1,000 girls in the school, and only maybe about 4 to 6 of them were Catholic. So it was a very particular experience. We grew up never visiting the south of Ireland. It was as if it didn't exist. I never crossed the border into Ireland until I was...
Same for me. I had never crossed the border into the north of Ireland growing up. It was like, stay away from that place.
It was like it wasn't there when we were going on holidays. It was never even an option. We would go to Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man, the UK, Channel Islands, Europe. But south of Ireland wasn't even mentioned. So it was a very Protestant experience. But myself and my best friend at the time, we would often talk about how this whole Catholic-Protestant divide was totally alien to us. And we felt a bit strange that we identified so little with it. So even though we were in this Protestant majority situation, we didn't identify with that either. And we didn't see ourselves really as Protestants. But we just didn't take sides. We couldn't understand. It was like a total unknown entity to us, why these two sides could be so opposed to each other. It didn't make any sense. And my own family weren't very political. They didn't discuss those things much. They didn't feel strongly about it. So I just grew up feeling really removed from all of that was going on in the area at the time. And at the same time, from as young as I can remember, I had an urge to be what I considered a religious person. But I didn't really identify with being a Protestant at the same time. So it was a bit of a contradiction, like a bit of a mystery. When I got into my early teenage years, I started to have like normal questions for someone who's come to Krishna consciousness, but they didn't seem to be very normal for all the people I was around at the time. And I was always, wanting to know some philosophical answers. I was always questioning, why are we here? How did we get here? Why am I me and not somebody else? What is an animal? What's a dog? What makes them different from us? Who made the world? All these things. But
we've all had those sorts of thoughts going on in our head.
I think
those thoughts going on in our head.
I think as devotees we have, but it's amazing because not everybody had those kind of thoughts. And I used to speak to some of my friends and they'd just say, well, why do you need to know all that stuff? Just have fun and, get on with life. And when I would ask, immediate family members as well, all those kind of questions, they would say, those are difficult questions to answer. You don't really need to know those things. Just have faith, But that wasn't enough for me. So I suppose later on in my teenage years, there was almost a bit of a, what devotees would call like an existential crisis, where, those questions became more like burning issues. Like, I need to know, I need to know the answers, because life just seemed a bit sort of pointless and a bit meaningless without understanding like the purpose of it all. But at the same time, I wasn't able to get anything out of, or hardly anything out of the Christian upbringing that my parents were trying to give me. At age 11, I'd asked them, could I stop going to church, because it just didn't mean anything to me. I just found it a boring and a bit of an uncomfortable experience. So I just didn't see the point in it. I didn't want to go to like brownies or guides or Christian Endeavor or Christian.
What is brownies and guides? And I'm not so familiar with these things.
They're Christian organizations for younger girls as brownies, and girl guides when you're a bit older.
Right.
They do a lot of fun activities and camping and games and all kinds of events.
Do you have to dress up in these weird uniforms and stuff?
Yeah, you have uniforms. They like scouts and things like that,
Yeah, okay.
But I just couldn't relate to any of it. And I had a Sunday school teacher who, looking back, I could say she was just so hypocritical. She was meant to be our Sunday school like Christian teacher, but she was laughing at the poor people who would come to the church, and how they were dressed, and criticizing them when they weren't there. And she was just like the antithesis of what you'd expect. So I lost faith in the whole thing. But at the same time, around 16, I started to really wonder like what happened after death. And I really felt I needed to know. And I wanted to know, was heaven real, and what would it be like? And things like, what age are you going to be when you go to heaven? And if you're sick, are you going to be sick there? And, all these things that nobody could answer.
It seems at such a young age, though, you kind of started questioning, because, I mean, and I remember when I was young, I was just like most young people, trying to have fun and kind of live in the world and do what enjoy as much as I could. I suppose for me, it didn't come till I was a bit later in life, my 20s and almost 30, but it seems to have kind of come from you from such an early age. And
well, it kind of came in and out. Like, there was times when I was just like any young person, periods of time when I probably didn't think about these things all the time. But at the same time, I remember particular events. I remember being about 11 or 12 and watching, some TV drama, and someone was murdered. And I got really scared, and I was thinking, oh my God, what happens after death? And I remember that stayed with me for months. And then probably some years went by and I didn't think about it much. And then at a certain point, I remember hearing a song, Top of the Pops, some song. And it was an atheistic lyrics. And I instinctively felt like, oh, I shouldn't listen to that. That feels like, God wouldn't be happy with that. So these kind of things were coming up, and they'd come and they'd go, but from time to time I'd feel a real burning need to get answers, and no one seemed to be able to give them to me. So it was a difficult time. So I guess then coming to Krishna consciousness, what that led to was, I went through university, went through kind of normal student life of lots of late nights and parties and pubs, and just trying to enjoy myself as much as possible.
But that wasn't working out, obviously.
It wasn't working out. I was getting more miserable. And eventually I got my degree and I finished, and it just seemed that all my social circles were finding their niche in life. Some were becoming doctors, some were going into further studies and, PhDs and stuff. Some were getting married, and people were starting to move away, and they all seemed to know where they were going and what their plan was. And I hadn't a clue. Like university had just been the next thing to do after school, so you don't have to sort of figure it all out too much.
Yeah.
And then when university ended, there was no more crutch, No.
I know the feeling, yeah. I know the feeling. But what did you study? Do you mind me asking?
I decided to study something that I hadn't studied. My only motivation or kind of criteria for deciding was it has to be something I haven't studied in school. I wanted to be different.
Right.
So I did social anthropology and sociology.
Okay.
They were interesting, but I didn't put my heart into them really.
Yeah.
distracted trying to find the meaning of life. I ended up hanging out in a circle of kind of like hippie punks because they were different. But I got a bit disillusioned by that as well, because they just started to get more and more into like, smoking weed and sitting around doing nothing all day. They weren't doing anything really kind of inspiring. So
Yeah.
it was just a very confusing time. And then eventually it came to a point where I just started going to the library looking for books on the meaning of life. And I used to come out with like a big stack, 8 books, the maximum you're allowed to borrow, and I'd bring them home and I'd start to go through them, and it was like, it just wasn't doing it. I even got some books on karma, reincarnation, on, psychology books on the brain and the mind. I just wasn't getting any answers.
Mm-hmm.
Really frustrating.
I can imagine,
yeah. And then eventually what happened was I had a boyfriend at the time, and after some time we split up. And when I was going to pick up a few of my belongings that were in his apartment, I spotted one of Prabhupada's books on the table, and someone had lent it to him.
What was the book?
And the book was The Science of Self-Realization.
Okay, yeah, same as... No, actually, that wasn't the first one I read. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or something similar to it.
It's a lot of devotees' first book, actually. So I spotted it, and there was just something about the title, science. It's a science, and it's self-realization. And I instinctively felt in my heart, this is going to answer my questions. And I just picked it up and put it in my bag and walked out.
It's almost like the book spoke to you.
Totally.
In itself.
I just knew, like, it wasn't a thought, maybe. It was just, this is going to answer everything. So I took it and I went out of the apartment, and I thought, hang on a minute, I shouldn't just take this. And I knew that it belonged to someone who lived upstairs in the building in a separate apartment, who used to be living in the temple years ago. So I went up to him and I said, look, I think this is your book and you've lent it to Terry. I just wondered if I could borrow it. And of course he was more than happy. So I went off home with it and started to read it straight away. And that was just an amazing experience, because immediately, like within minutes of reading, there's just this huge feeling of like relief, total pacification, and, it's all going to be okay. I can cope. The world.
I'm not crazy.
I'm not crazy. The world's not so scary. It's all okay. And it wasn't just the relief. It was actually, to be honest, it was a feeling of, I've already known this before, but I've forgotten. So as I was reading it, it was like remembering. I was thinking, of course it's Krishna. Of course there's karma and reincarnation. Of course I'm not the body. It was like clicking into place. And I remember distinctly thinking, how could I have managed to stay alive this long without knowing this?
I think the first time I read I'm trying to remember the book now, but it also just spoke to me, you might say. When I did read it, I couldn't understand it at all. It was mind-boggling to me, and I had to just think about it and dwell on it and meditate on it for a whole year before I actually kind of started to sink in and
well, I get that as well. I get that as well, because even though I had that experience that I've just described, which was so strong, at the same time, it took me a whole other year after that to come to the point of practice.
Mm.
So it was an interesting kind of situation to get so much solace and feel so much relief, but yet to need so much more time to realize that, okay, now I'm going to start chanting, and now I'm going to follow these spiritual principles. There was still a lot of things I didn't understand. I think I was, by Krishna's grace, given enough understanding to give me some relief from suffering, but it still took a lot of time spent with devotees and questioning them and having doubts answered and understanding more. And then eventually, 1 year later, I remember picking up a set of chanting beads and saying, right, I'm going to chant around and I'm going to see what happens.
Did it feel like it took you an hour or almost a whole day just to chant one round?
It just felt underwhelming.
All right.
I thought, okay, there was no fireworks, no sparks, there was no amazing experience. I did it. That was it. I've tried it. Nothing wow happened, but I guess it was just a start. It was a beginning.
Yeah.
And then there was gradual progression after that to start to visit the temple, start to come along more regularly, get to know devotees, and then very gradually start to try and chant more. But kirtan was a whole different experience.
Oh, well, that goes without saying, I think.
That was a very instant effect. The japa took a bit longer.
But eventually it came, obviously, what they say about chanting japa.
Yeah, it did.
I had a taste, or at least occasionally had a taste.
It was only really, I think, when I went to stay in the temple after about 6 months of coming in contact with that book, I started to get a little bit more interested and started to visit the temple a bit more. And then 1 year after that, I decided to go and spend 6 months living in the temple in Belfast to just get more of an experience of the whole thing, and also to learn a bit more about it, get a bit of training. So I moved in, and then we were doing japa every morning. And then when I started doing 16 rounds every morning with other people, then I started to experience, okay, this does have an effect. This is actually really calming my mind, and it actually seemed to spark a lot of creativity as well. No, that's not the goal of chanting, but I noticed it as the byproduct.
A byproduct of it, yeah.
Yeah, it made my mind much more creative, and I started to relish it. But not that initial time. That was just a beginning. Maybe that's a test.
Yeah, I could say I had the similar experiences. So I would.
Yeah.
But it's like the first time I chanted, my mind was crazy, and it seemed like a long time. It probably only took 10 minutes, but it seemed like it was taking forever. It's like my mind was fighting against me to do it. It's like I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
I had to do, and I just kept doing it.
Maybe we need to learn, a little bit how to do it. Maybe that's what it is, because I think it took quite a while to realize that it is a very internal thing, that it's not just going through the motions of fingering the beads and saying the mantra, but that it really is about, and not even in my experience, not just hearing, but actually being prayerful.
Present.
Yeah, prayerful actually, wanting to go deeper with it, and wanting to try to actually really, as you say, be present, but actually really in a mood of surrender as well. So I think that's why it was, maybe it's a strong thing to say it was underwhelming, but I think it's because it really was just an external practice of holding beads and saying mantras without really knowing how to do it. And that took time. One of the first devotees that was there, training me was Keshiva. And I remember her saying, look, you got to get this right in the beginning with the chanting, with the japa, because if you don't get it right in the beginning, you can go for 20 years before it'll click what japa really is. So she was a big influence.
Has it taken 20 years?
Probably longer. More like 30. But I mean, I'm joking, but at the same time I'm not, because I would say that I really feel that now is actually the really first time of being able to do japa in a mode of being really voluntary about it, as opposed to dutiful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something over the last couple of months I've noticed, that a lot of the time, we take vows to do our rounds, and so there's this obligation to do them, so you do them for that reason. But now I'd say just recently it's shifted from a focus of, I should do this and I must do this, to I really want to give this a chance to work. I really want to do this because I'm curious to see where it's going to bring me, and I want to give it more of an opportunity to be effective. I want to do it in the right way. So, I get up in the morning more looking forward to it now, rather than
Oh God, I have to chant. Hare Krishna.
Exactly. Got to get through it. That's great. That's them done. Put the beanbag down.
Yeah, I can enjoy my life.
And I remember actually one of the first Sunday feast classes I heard when I was going on in Belfast in the early days. There was a devotee there called Bhakta Rupa. He was an older devotee, very serious person. But I remember him saying in one of his classes, he was talking about his own japa, and he was saying that the more he did it in this mood of concentrating and being into it, the more the time was going quickly and it was enjoyable. But if he was doing it, purely to get it out of the way, it seemed to take forever. And it was really boring because you're not entering into it. You're staying on the surface of it. It's more of an external thing, so you don't get to relish it. But not everybody takes as long to develop a relationship with japa, I guess.
Maybe not. I mean, I think I've gone in and out of myself. Kind of start was hard, then it kind of evolved into really wanting to do it, and then as other things, life and other things gets responsibilities and stuff come along the way, then you're going to go out of it, and it becomes like I have to get this number of rounds done, and then do all the other things that you got to do during the day, and etc. So it's kind of like a wave up and down a lot of the time.
The zigzag path as it's described.
Yeah. So when you moved into the temple, then what kind of came after that? What were the things that happened?
Well, I was just thinking about this recently, that I was in the temple, and so I spent 6 months there, and I loved the morning program. Funny enough, that was the initial thing, getting up for Mangal Arti and japa period and class and all of that right through to breakfast was kind of blissful, and that was really good. But what I was struggling with was that after all of that, I couldn't find anything that I could put my heart into doing. And yourself in the temple, there's not so much of a choice of activities. It was either
toilet cleaning.
It's either clean the kitchen, do some gardening, or go out and give out books.
Oh yeah, the dreaded books.
Yeah, I didn't want to do any of those things. So it was a quandary, because I would love the mornings, and then and I loved the evening program. In the evening we'd have Gaur Arti, bhajans afterwards, reading Krishna book, hot milk, off to bed. That was all great. It was just the question of the 8 hours
in between,
what to do with those. And then I gradually started to realize that, well, I've probably got to do something else. But nobody really at that time was explaining to me that if you can't get absorbed in any of these things, then you probably have some sort of like thing that you need to do, which is more like according to your nature.
Yeah.
Not everybody's meant to live in the temple. Not everybody has to live in the temple. So maybe you need to do some sort of work, or maybe you just need to be married and bring up kids. But if you're not finding that any of those things are really gelling with you, then you've got to find something else. But I don't think that was really understood at the time. So no one was able to really advise me like that. But, when I think back from about age 14, I probably would have, it sounds like a funny thing to say, but I probably should have, or, could have, would have been married at that time. Because I actually, really loved just like looking after the home.
Yeah.
And the garden and cooking and, just being in that home environment really suited me, So after 6 months, I spent a bit of time trying to collect some money, different, means of doing that. I did do a little bit of book distribution, didn't really like it. Loved Harinam. But after 6 months, then I moved out and got engaged, got married, and then had my daughter Akadashi. 1994 that was. So about a year and a half later, 1994. And then the next lot of years were spent with that as the, the main focus, bringing her up. We moved to different communities. We lived in Wicklow for a while, and then we moved up to the Inshrath community where I've been ever since.
So what was that like, kind of living in a Hare Krishna home or Krishna conscious home and bringing up a child in that sort of environment?
Yeah, it was.
I can't imagine it was the easiest thing in the world.
It was nice in a lot of ways, but it was also, it's still a puzzle how to do it. I'm sure it's all ahead of you. It's a puzzle, You're trying to constantly get the balance between how to help that child understand Krishna consciousness and at the same time let them have access to, regular society and normal life so that they're not isolated, because especially since our, community and society is so small, it's hard to, meet all of the needs. So you're always sort of trying to, pull this way and pull that way a little bit, trying to get that just right. For the first few years, we decided we wouldn't put our daughter into school because we wanted to try and give like more of a Krishna conscious education. So from when she was 4 until 7, myself and another mother, we tried to homeschool our children, and a couple of other kids got involved. At one point I was living up near the island, another point I was living on Inishrath Island trying to do it there. But it wasn't really my thing to be a teacher. So I was trying to do my bit, but I was struggling because I'd be there trying to give this time and attention, but my mind would be pulling me everywhere else to do other things. And I realized, it's not going to work because I can't give
that's obviously not your nature, is to be a teacher.
Not my nature to be a
so it's going to make it
not
twice as hard.
Kids teacher anyway. Not that, but it was really difficult to decide to put her in school as well, because I had my heart set on the fact that, she should have, Krishna conscious education. And it was, a big surrender to kind of give that up and say, okay, she just got to go to regular school.
But it wasn't like it was the worst thing in the world, obviously, to put her into regular school. And
it felt like it at the time.
Yeah, okay.
It felt like the worst thing in the world to put her in regular school, because I was thinking I really wanted her to have a bit of, a different upbringing and to get the best possible shot at becoming Krishna conscious and being away from all the other influences. And, for those first 7 years, she really had been kept away from like mainstream society. She hadn't gone to like a creche or a nursery school or preschool or any of that. She hardly knew anyone that wasn't a part of the Hare Krishna community. And then she was, going out into the big bad world. But, it all worked out okay, because it actually suited her nature to do that.
Yeah.
And she's said to me a good few times over the years, she's really glad that I put her in school, and that she thinks she would have really not enjoyed it if she'd been kept in a smaller social situation with, not so many kids, not so many people generally, and away from, the whole mainstream thing, because it taught her how to be balanced. And
live in the world, basically.
Yeah, to be able to be in the world and have her spiritual life and not be like struggling to balance the two things and not be like at all facing any conflict around that. So I learned a lot from watching her growing up, actually, because I realized that, as people who've come to Krishna consciousness from a different background, we've joined, and a lot of the time we give everything else up. Like when I joined, I gave away everything, my big record collection, all my books, all my clothes, apart from things I was going to wear in the temple, everything else is gone.
Wow.
Abandoned the whole thing, move into the
total
temple.
renunciation.
Yeah, I moved into the temple with a hold all full of stuff, and that was all I had. Everything else was gone, sold, sold or given away. But I realized watching my daughter that generation, her generation, because they don't have to join, because they're brought up in that environment already, it's not an extreme thing. It's not kind of all or nothing. They don't have to like abandon everything to have a spiritual life. And they have a natural sort of feeling of how to relate to both. That I think we weren't able to do, because maybe it would have been too difficult to try and keep some spiritual practice if we'd still been relating to mainstream society, but they just don't seem to have that issue. And even friends and relatives of the family would comment to me when she was growing up how they were impressed with her balance, that she had this set of beliefs and values that were different from their kids, but yet she was totally kind of peaceful and confident with it and totally able to relate to all of them.
Okay.
So they thought she really had it down, that
That's good.
Yeah, I think they thought she was a very good example.
She could have a lot of influence on peers and people of her own age.
Yeah, they were impressed with her. They thought, yeah, this is very balanced. This is something different, but yet she can relate to everybody else, and she can fit in no problem and be herself and not be embarrassed or awkward around her different faith and values. Very confident with the whole thing. So that was really, like, I learned a lot watching that, about how the second generation can be so much more integrated. So then later on in her teenage years, there's always going to be some challenges then, because you've grown up, all your friends in school are starting to go out at night, and the usual.
Yeah, we all know that one.
So it's very hard to completely avoid all of that, and of course she naturally got a bit drawn into all of that as well. But what really kind of kept her interested in her spiritual practice was that from the age of about 12 or 13, she'd be going over to England every summer and joining the Pandavasena youth group and going on their summer trips. And they were such like a happy kind of dynamic, fired up, progressive group of young people, that she got so much from that. That I think that was a really good background support for her. That even when she was with her friends over here and school friends, it gave her a lot of like strength and ability to stick to her own values, because she knew that she belonged to this larger group of young people who were like really good people, but also having a lot of fun. So that made Krishna consciousness fun and interesting.
And it's kind of, she's come full circle almost now, and that she's dived headlong into it now, I think.
Yeah. Now she's chanting japa, and now we're doing a nice thing. Most mornings of the week, at least 4 days a week, we're reading Bhagavad Gita together and discussing it in the morning over Zoom.
All right.
And she does a lot of service for their service for the manor, and for her spiritual master, and for Kirtan London and Mantra Lounge. And she goes on these retreats with some devotees that do Kirtan Japa retreats. So and now she's working for the Avanti school group as well. So it's very natural, though. One thing about Ekadashi, and I think it's the same for a lot of her friends actually, but I've noticed it for years, is there was no sense of like pressure or guilt on herself to ever be like more than she was. It was always embracing that Krishna consciousness from a very natural place of whatever she was naturally drawn to do, and then building on that. And none of this sort of like giving herself a hard time or beating herself up or
whipping yourself.
Yeah, I'm only here, I should be there. That was just totally absent, and yet it just seemed to grow in a very kind of organic way. Like one bit of service and involvement would lead to more. Very healthy, very, very psychologically healthy. It's very nice to see that. I think we could do with a bit more of that. But that's the higher birth, isn't it, of being born into a situation where you have Krishna consciousness around you from birth.
Yeah,
it's just a better start. You see the advantages of it.
I just wanted to draw your attention to these three figures in the background. You have Juggernaut, Baladev, Subhadra. Just out of curiosity, how did you come to have Juggernaut, Baladev, Subhadra in your home, and so many other deities as if that I've seen when I'm there?
That's one of my altars, and I would show you the other one if I thought I wouldn't kind of mess up the here, but I don't trust myself, so I'll just keep it where it is. Yeah, Juggernaut Ballet Badger, they've been here for about 10 years. And that was an interesting story how they came. For me, it was anyway. So initially, when I wasn't very long in the movement, and I hadn't joined that long, I was given three small Juggernaut Baldev Subhadra deities. They were maybe 6 or 8 inches high. These ones, as you can see, are about 3.5 feet high, something like that.
And they used to be in a temple.
They've been in different places, yeah. So I had these small Juggernaut deities when I first joined. But at that time, my daughter was just a baby and I was very busy. And I just felt I couldn't look after them properly. So I put them away in their case for a long time. And then eventually I gave them away to another devotee because I just thought, they're not being worshipped, better that they go to somebody else who can look after them. But years later, I started regretting that I ever gave them away. I started to miss them. I was thinking, why did I ever give them away? So then I started meditating upon having Jagannath, Baldev and Subhadra deities again. And that was just growing. The desire to have them was growing. And then at one point, I actually started praying to Krishna, if you'd like to come back in the form of Jagannath deities, that would be very nice. And then there were some very nice ones for sale in the shop in Inishrath, and I was tempted a couple of times to purchase them, but something was making me hold back. I was thinking, no, it's better if they just come to you. You're not really meant to buy deities. It's better if they just are given or offered to you. So I kept holding back. And then one day I went along to the temple in Inishrath, and Bhagavati Devi Dasi was there. And Jagannath Baldev and Subhadra had been in her house for some time, like a matter of months at that stage. Mother Narayani was there too, visiting Inishrath. And Bhagavati just said to me, I wonder, Karunesvari, would you like to take the Jagannath deities that are in my home and look after them in your home? And I said, wow, why are you offering that? And she said, because you're doing this prasadam business and you're cooking so much prasadam and they need to eat a lot. They're big deities. And I have them in my flat and I'm only one single person that doesn't eat much and they're just getting a few bits of dried fruit and nuts and a little bit of milk now and then. And I'm convinced that they can't be getting enough. They must be hungry. So I wonder, would you like to?
They're being starved.
Yeah. So I wonder, would you like to offer them all the prasadam that you're cooking for the market? And because I've been wanting Jagannath deities, I immediately kind of felt like, yeah, I want them. But I wasn't sure. So I remember asking Mother Narayani's opinion, and she seemed to think I should do it. And then I came home and checked with the family, and everybody was in favor.
Okay.
So I said, yeah, okay. And that was it. That was about probably 10 years ago, because I think Kadashi was about 17 or so at the time. I remember just where they're sitting now, there used to be a big TV screen. And there was nowhere else for them to go except that spot. So they came in and the TV
had to go.
The TV got booted out.
And you're all the better for it, obviously.
Oh, definitely. I mean, now, at the time, that was actually a little bit of a surrender because I was attached to watching stuff on TV at that time. That's why we had it. And I was attached to movies. But that's kind of quite long gone now. That's luckily one material desire that was dropped off. It's not something I kind of miss at all anymore. No time, even if I wanted to. But yeah, I also have another altar where I have, as you know.
Maybe you can mention who's on the other altar, although we won't be able to see. You can just mention.
Yeah, I've got Radha Krishna in the form of Radha Gopinath, Krishna Balaram, Gaurnatai, and two Shalagram Sheilas, and I have to say my favorite of all, Giriraj. Giriraj.
You must have spent a lot of time, looking after and, preparing food and so many other things for them.
It's not as much as people would think. It's about, in the morning, it's about 45 minutes. And that's just to wake them, bathe and dress and decorate Giriraj, go through the waking up routine, offer some incense, change the water, etc. once a week I do the flowers. That takes about half an hour a week. Whatever I cook, I mean, they always get something offered every day. Whatever I cook gets offered. That's usually twice a day. And then bathing them. I bathed them yesterday. Maybe I should show them to you because they all look really nice and shiny. Maybe, maybe at the end. Will I do it at the end?
Okay, do it at the end. Okay.
Just in case
now, you kind of talked about, cooking there. So let's, I just wanted to get into your whole business, which is about food. Your whole business is about food, and you're at 2 different markets on the weekend, and it's quite a popular venture that you have there called Cardinals Kitchen. So maybe you could kind of tell us more about that.
Yeah, we've been doing Krishnas Kitchen since late 2021. So how long is that then? Sorry, 2001. 6 months. 20 years and 6 months. That's
20 years, wow. It's real dedication, that is, too.
It's just once you start, you just don't really stop, But that was also very, to me, kind of like mysterious how that came about, to see Krishna's hand behind it. Basically, we didn't really have a steady way of making like an income or supporting ourselves up until that point. We'd been selling some paintings as devotees used to do in Ireland, selling some prints, bit of this and that, but nothing stable or steady or that we could put our hearts into. And then for 1 year I took up studying homeopathy. I was traveling up to college in Antrim, and I was thinking, I kind of have an interest in healing arts and things like that, and I think I could maybe do this and that would be steady. So I did a year of study, and it was going well. I was getting good grades and things. I had 3 more years to do, and I was set to carry on with it. And then one night, I remember it was a Sunday evening, and we were living in a little apartment in Lisnaski, and I was cooking something for the family. And as I was cooking, I just got this very strong thought, just appeared to come from nowhere, that I actually really enjoy cooking. Maybe I should be doing something like this for a living instead of the homeopathy. I distinctly remember it was so clear and out of the blue. I hadn't had a thought like that at all before.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, because that was on the Sunday evening, on the Tuesday, first of all, what happened was the Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting with my husband, and we were talking about how we really needed to find a different way to make money and support ourselves. And it had come to a crunch, and we said, we can't go on as we have anymore. We need something more steady, more reliable, more enjoyable to us. And so that was like, what on earth are we going to do? That evening, we went along to Gagelum beside the island, and we were calling in to visit Derek and Magna Giti in their home. And just as we were arriving, this devotee, Raghunath Bhatta, was leaving. And we knew that he was selling prashadam in a market in Dublin. So we said to him, that's a really interesting thing you're doing, for your family, like to support yourselves. How did you get started? We hear you're doing very well, because we'd heard he was doing well at it, and he was managing to support themselves on that. And he says, actually, I'm selling it. Do you want to buy it? And I just heard myself saying yes. Without any thought, I just said yes. And everyone kind of looked at me as if, like, what? Are you sure? So we said, look, give us some time to think about it. And we went over to my sister's house, and she was there with her husband, and we discussed it. And I just became convinced that I wanted to do this. So we went back and told him, yeah, we want to take it, but we don't really have any money to buy it from you. And he said, no. He said, look, that's okay. If you can commit to just starting to do it, and out of what you earn each week, you can just put something in my credit union account, pay it off over a year. You can have it, because I just wanted to go to good home.
Yeah.
So that was it. And that was the start of it. And that was September 2001. Actually, the day we started was Prabhupada's Vyas Puja.
Wow.
And that was a kind of purifying day, because I remember there was, we were going to the festival, and then after lunch we had to go out and buy lots of stuff, lots of boga for the business. And I remember I made an offering for Prabhupada, and it was very emotional, which I wouldn't usually be, but there was for some reason feeling very emotional. And then I walked down to the quay to leave to go shopping, and I slipped on this wet bit of wood, and I fell really hard, flat on the ground. I got a big bruise and really hurt myself. And then went into town to start the shopping and got stung by a wasp on the head. So it was a memorable day, And then we started the prasada business, and for the first 6 weeks of trading, it poured morning till night all day long. It was just Saturdays, and the first 6 Saturdays we got drenched and practically sold nothing.
Wow.
And thought, what?
That was the test.
Yeah, what have we taken on here? But then it gradually started to build and grow, and over the years, first of all we got a bigger, canopy set up with more tables, and then we got better equipment, and then we expanded the menu, and it just gradually built. We started off just selling a vegetable curry and samosas, and
I was going to ask you what sort of thing, what is your
wasn't much in the beginning.
The items that you sell, and
I think there were 2 or 3 things in the beginning: curry, rice, samosas, and these baked kind of like pastries, like pies.
Okay.
And then after a while we added spring rolls, and then we added koftas, and then we went through a few little experiments with different savories and things. But when we first introduced cheese subji, suddenly the thing just took off.
Paneer, cheese subji, yeah.
Paneer, yeah. There was paneer, and then we had the idea to call it half and half, where you could get a dish with rice and curry and cheese subji. And that suddenly became.
I think that's one of your biggest sellers, if I remember.
That's like the signature dish.
Signature.
Yeah.
People love that.
People love that. So then it just started to grow, and 2013, then we got the catering trailer, which has made life so much easier instead of being under a canopy. And then that attracted more people because it looked well. It's nice, clean setup. So we developed more regulars, but at the same time, it's been through lots of ups and downs just because of what goes on in the economy. And there was the recession of 2008 that affected everybody. Restaurants, affected Govindas. People just didn't have money. Everything halved basically from one month to the next. Income halved, takings halved. You have to kind of work through that. You have to just grin and bear it. Then it gradually came back up again, and things were flourishing again for the last 5 years before lockdown. It was like peak, the peak of.
Yeah, I remember because I was working with you on it.
Yeah, you were helping.
Amazing.
The queues were phenomenal, like especially Dun Laoghaire on a Sunday, you could just have solid queues for 4 hours, and the amount of prasada being sold was quite phenomenal. But then lockdown came, and everything got shifted about again, and it's taken a long time to build back up. So we're still not back up to where we were before, but we'll have to see how it goes. But it's satisfying. And just one more thing I would say about the whole venture is that it's like spiritual life in general. It has its ups and downs. So how I've felt about running Cardinals Kitchen has sometimes been up, sometimes been down, but because it's your service and your livelihood, you just get on with it. But I must say, over the last 5 years or so, I kind of stepped back from it a bit, and it was going on, but I was less
in the background.
involved. I was in the background more, just letting it happen, and for a lot of the time it was doing very well. But just recently, I've probably reawakened or rekindled more of an interest in it again. And just in the last month or so, I've returned to just, I suppose it's like a, quality control, looking to see, can anything be improved? Can we do anything better? I've returned to cooking most of the preps in ghee, which I hadn't done for a long time. And I think that's made, apart from the vegan preps, but whatever I can cook in ghee instead of in oil, getting inspired to do that because it's healthier, it tastes better. I feel that's just made, the offering a bit superior. And I feel we're back on top of the quality of it again now. And it's exciting, for the first time in a long time to be giving out prashadam again. Been a lot of duty over the years, but now it feels exciting again, which is really nice. And one last thing, there was a devotee visiting from England. His name is Shukadev. He was staying in Inishrath for a while there. And then he was giving a Bhagavatam class. And I mean, you could say it's bizarre that it took me so long to get an appreciation of prashadam distribution. But something he said in his class really helped. He was mentioning that the reason any of us can take up spiritual life, take up Krishna consciousness, is because of past sukriti. And without that, it's very difficult, to begin. So it's usually something we've done previously that makes us somewhat eligible. And he said there are different activities that can give sukriti to the general people so that they're going to be receptive to spiritual life in the future. And prashadam distribution is one of those things. And it just clicked, and I felt much more of a purpose in it than never. I mean, I always knew it's good to distribute prashadam. You can't avoid knowing that. But at the same time, I would tend to judge it and think all these years, and no one I know has come to spiritual practice from it. No one's become a devotee of Krishna. I don't really see it, affecting anyone. I don't see the results of it. And it can be a little bit disenthusing. You think, it doesn't really seem to make a difference. People come in week after week, year after year, and they just seem the same. But when he's saying, but it's true, isn't it? You can think like that, But when he said that, I thought,
which is funny because that was the first thing that drew me to Krishna consciousness. It was the I was diving straight into it.
Yeah. But when he said that, it clicked, and I thought, okay, you can't measure it. You just cannot measure the effect that someone coming in contact with any form of Krishna is having. But if it's creating that sort of, background of some sukriti, then it's wonderful. So I guess I finally developed a bit more faith in it, which gives the whole thing more meaning.
Yeah.
I've surrendered to it as well. I don't do it anymore out of a feeling of, this is so much work and I have to do it all. But
obligation. It's joyful.
It's more joyful now. At last,
20 years. It took 20 years.
I'm a late bloomer,
a lot of us are. But just touching on, if for anyone who's maybe watching or listening, where are you based? Where can people find you? And
in the markets?
In the markets, yeah. Just to let people know.
Yeah, we're in St Anne's Park on a Saturday, which is in Clontarf, and in Dunleary beside the library on a Sunday. Okay. That's where we are currently.
And I think you also have a website for the page and a Facebook page.
I have a Facebook page. I used to have a website. It was shut down, but I have a Facebook page, and contact details are on that for anyone who would want to email or message.
And just from my side, I think I'd recommend anyone who hasn't gone out to Cardinals Kitchen should definitely go and taste a bit the food, because it is really, really good. So it is. Okay, so just we've got a few minutes left. I just want to ask you about important things like what have been your kind of biggest realizations over the last 20 years or so in Krishna consciousness?
Yeah.
What's kind of hit home with you might say?
Yeah, I've given this some thought, and I think most important thing I can really grasp anyway is that, as someone trying to practice spiritual life, you've got your mind and you're trying to figure out with your mind, what's the best thing to do. But what I realized after all these years is that a lot of the time it was nothing to do with what I was trying to figure out at all. And it was actually Krishna was arranging different circumstances and different people, different devotees to come into my life that were hugely, influential. And I can see that all of that was just going on by Krishna's arrangement, regardless of what I thought I was trying to do or what I thought I needed. And just recently, I've become really grateful for that, because when I look back over the last 30 years, I can see that there's been this sort of like guiding force that I can only see now looking backwards, that at the time I was really unaware of like the impact it was having. So, I can give different examples. Like at one point, about 10 years ago, I started becoming aware that, okay, I'm trying to practice Krishna consciousness, but at the same time, we're all, unique personalities, unique people, and we have different, conditioning and maybe, issues from our past or from childhood. And somehow you've got to bring all of that in together. And I hadn't a clue how to do it. But then through a couple of Prabhupada disciples, they pointed me in the direction of a different Prabhupada disciple, Karunesvari. And he was writing and speaking about exactly what I needed to hear. It was tailor-made for me. I couldn't have been guided to the more perfect source of information if I'd tried, if anyone had tried. And I didn't know he existed, but Mother Narayani and Bhakti Brihad Bhagavat Swami, just without me even asking about what I was looking for, guided me towards him. And I thought, wow, that's perfect fit. So for the last 10, he left his body a year ago tomorrow. But for the 10 years previous to that, I had, he was like a mentor basically, and that was hugely influential for my understanding of Krishna consciousness. And he's a very broad-minded and practical and caring person. And to me, just a perfect example of a wonderful, Vaishnav, the result of 50 years of practice. So that was a real perfect arrangement made by Krishna. And then another thing I realized was that just through association of different friends and without, again, any real thinking on the matter myself, I was led in the direction of attending all these kirtan melas. I didn't choose that really or go looking for it, but just I get invited, different groups of friends were going, and I tagged along, and that became a massive part of my life. And I realized again that I suppose how I would describe it is that I think Krishna guided me towards environments that I would be able to find some, taste in, because everybody's got their area of Krishna consciousness where they're going to feel, that they can connect more. But I don't think I would have gone out of my way to look for those. But, again, I was just guided into those situations. And then you realize that something has become a major part of your Krishna consciousness, but it almost kind of came to you rather than you having to go to it. It just sort of manifests in your life that all of a sudden you're in certain association and you're doing certain things and you're going certain places, and you realize, this is probably one of the most sustaining things that I've come across. But it was just, shown to me, or I was guided.
It's almost like Krishna's kind of fitting the pieces in, so that you take this particular path almost.
Yeah, exactly.
You're being guided.
Yeah, he's pulling the strings and he's placing me in certain association and certain conditions and situations that I don't think I would have had the intelligence or understanding to arrange for myself. And then I got a big realization that going to like places like the Govardhan retreats, that was a huge impact on my life as well. Before the lockdowns, we'd go to the retreats in Govardhan
in India.
Every Kartik, at the end of Kartik actually. And then you get the association of these devotees who are absorbed in Bhagavatam and in the writings of previous acharyas, and who have so much appreciation and love for Govardhan itself. And I just saw how powerful it is to be around these Vaishnavas, and how you can end up having some appreciation of a holy place or a bhajan or a scripture that you would never have come to on your own. But just by placing yourself in that environment and that association, something, a little tiny, tiny spark of what they have can get transferred to you, and these can become major parts of what sustain you in your spiritual life. So I guess to conclude, because I see the time, when you ask, like what's, major realization, I think the major realization is that Krishna's arranging all the things that we need, and just trust that and go with it, and be open to it, and try and get as much really good association as possible, and whatever aspect of Krishna consciousness you feel you can connect with most, just go for that thing. If it's
into that.
Yeah, if it's kirtan, go to the kirtan melas. If it's reading, then let yourself read loads. Just absorb yourself in whatever works for you, and don't worry so much about the things that you're not attracted to, but just be grateful for the things that you are, and do more and more of them, and just let it grow as it will on its own accord.
Okay. There was one last thing I wanted to ask you about before we did finish up. And how has kind of your spiritual practice helped you, or how has it helped you to grow over the last number of years? Yeah,
that's a big topic, but to try and say something kind of brief about that, succinct, again, I'd have to refer back to Karunesvari, and what I learned from him is that there's two types of growth we're doing all the time. There's what he would call our vertical growth, which is our spiritual progress towards Krishna. So it's vertical, it's going up. And then there's our horizontal growth, where we're developing as humans and people that we are, that we don't just...
We're expanding, aren't we?
We don't just drop all that, we have a nature, we have a mentality and a psychology, and the two things are meant to work together, and too much emphasis on one without the other, especially in the early stages, it's not going to work. It's not going to be able to be maintained in the long run. So one helps the other. So sometimes, and at the same time, you can almost see that they are in one sense the same thing, because if you have some issue, some blockage, okay, I'll give an example. There's a great interview, I think, by it's by Chaitanya Charan interviewing Yogeshwara Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, and he's talking a little bit about this kind of area of how we develop, and how we grow as devotees, and he's making some points about how difficult it is to see how anybody else is doing, or even evaluate how we're doing ourselves, because it's complex. So he makes a point that it's not usually, so much even of an issue of the sadhana or even the regulative principles that hold us back, but it's more of an issue that devotees will have some inner blockage. It can be an emotional thing, it can be something from childhood, and that obstacle can get so much in the way of progress that we can't even bring ourselves to apply the process properly. But when you resolve that thing, then you can make great strides forward. So when you look at it like that, you can see that there's hardly a separation between the vertical and the horizontal, because if you figure out some issue that's holding you back spiritually, and then you immediately make some progress in your spiritual life, it's almost all the one thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically, to sum it up, the process of Krishna consciousness not only gives you that experience of connecting, in the spiritual process to Krishna, but it really helps you on the personal and human level to understand yourself better, work out who you are, what your strengths are, your weaknesses, your abilities, to to learn to deal with your weaknesses, and to become more balanced, stronger, more positive. I used to have a lot of problems with them, a negative mindset, worrying, what if, worst case scenarios.
Yeah. That's what the mind does.
But that's really gotten so much better, like 100%, 200%. So it's hugely beneficial on all levels. I don't actually know how anyone can navigate this world without a strong spiritual practice.
They can't.
Yeah. I certainly couldn't.
Yeah, I find it difficult myself.
And we know we go in and out. It's a zigzag path, so our practice sometimes goes up and down a little bit in intensity. But as one devotee I heard him giving class recently on Inishrath, and he was saying when he looks back over all of his years in Krishna consciousness, it's about the same amount of time as I've been, practicing. He says at the times when his practice weakened, he had so much problems with his mind. And at the times when his sadhana in particular was strong, there's practically no problems from the mind. So it's a whole other world. It's either the world of spiritual practice or the world of the mind, really. That's how I see it.
The mind creates all the problems. And our spiritual practice solves all the problems.
Yeah, and
or at least it helps.
Just to finish off at this point, I think I would say that current sort of realization or understanding is that at a certain point we're trying to practice some sadness, some reading and some chanting, because we know that's the process and we know that we should and we know it'll be good for us. But it's it's a real effort. And then then it comes to a point where kind of the balance tips a little bit and you realize that those things kind of actually are your life. That's what it's actually all about. That's where the peace is, where the relish is. It's not just about trying to fit those things in on top of your life, but it's about making your life all about those things. And that's, there's much more kind of satisfaction and solace in that then. Okay. But again, those realizations have come recently just from being around people who are practicing a lot of sadhana and seeing the benefits of it and realizing, I want that. So I think going forward for me, it's about trying to set my life up around that. More time for sadhana, and then everything else sort of flows with that. That's the conclusion.
Okay.
Gone way over time.
That's all right. Time is not important, as long as we have enough to talk about. So I'm just looking at our Facebook page and seeing if there's any questions from anyone.
Meanwhile, maybe I'll bring the camera over and show you the other altar.
Yeah, please do. It'd be nice to see. Very great to see your living room. I remember being many times in your living room, and there's a whole atmosphere when you're just very peaceful atmosphere in that just in that particular room. So there is.
Can you see?
Yeah, we can see.
I don't have the overhead light on, but hopefully they're visible. They're clear. Jai.
If anyone is listening in and wants to ask a question, please put it up on the Facebook chat. That's quite a good number of deities to look after.
Yeah.
But even that is part of your sadhana.
It is.
It's taken care of. So many deities.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. It takes time, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
They're very beautiful. I'm amazed they're here sometimes.
And they've all come to you, have they?
Yeah.
Or majority of them.
Yeah, quite a few of them came from Prahlad and Nandamaya's family. They gave us born a Thai, Radha Gopinath, and actually there's a Radha Gopal deity as well, which technically belongs to my daughter, but I'm looking after him for her. Then Krishna Balaram, there's a bit of a story. I actually bought them in Vrindavan because I couldn't resist it, but then felt guilty because you're not really meant to buy deities and gave them away. I felt like maybe I shouldn't have them. Maybe that was, impulsive, and maybe Krishna didn't actually want me to have those deities. So I gave them away to another devotee for about 4 years, and he worshipped them for some time, and then had stopped worshipping them. And I got an inkling one day, just was thinking about it, and I thought, I'm feeling maybe he's not worshipping them anymore. So I made inquiries, and he wasn't. And at that time, I was in Vrindavan on a trip there, and I went and stood in front of the Krishna Balaram deities there in Vrindavan, and I said, I have a feeling this devotee is not worshipping the Krishna Balaram deities I gave him anymore. I said, so those deities are the same as you. You're them, you're in them. So if you'd like to come back to me, I'd be very happy to have you back. And then I forgot all about that prayer. That was Kartik time. Forgot about it for months. And then one day when I was back home, it was February, and doorbell rang. I opened the door, and a devotee had brought the deities back to me.
Wow.
So there they were. So they came back, and I was very happy to see them.
Okay. So
Giriraj, he came through Mother Narayani. She sent him to Ireland with another devotee and asked if I would look after him until she came to Ireland, and then she was going to bring him and give him to a devotee in Europe somewhere. So I started to look after him, and then I got attached. I didn't want to give him back. So I wrote to her and said, I know this is for another devotee, but is there any way I could keep him? So she forwarded that message on to the devotee that he was meant to go to. And that devotee replied and said, yes, please keep him. I'll get another one. And then the most recent additions are the 2 Shalagram Shilas, and they were given to me by a devotee, Shaunaka Rishi, in Oxford about 2 years ago now, nearly 2 years ago. And that's it, no more.
Your home is blessed, so it is.
Certainly is. I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be here. Yeah, I take it for granted a lot of the time.
I think we all do.
So,
from time to time, yeah. You don't realize what we've got until it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully
we're back in our mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the show. It's very much appreciated. It's been an interesting and wonderful discussion with you. Amanda, anything else? Any questions or anything coming up?
No. Everyone's saying Haribo.
Haribo. Haribo.
Thank you very much from me. It was nice to hear a very inspiring story. I remember the first time I tried your food at the Karunesvari Kitchen.
Mm.
And I had paneer before many times, but that was a whole different experience. Wow. I remember asking you, how did you make the pancake? Because it was so, special.
Wow.
So yeah,
it definitely was.
Let's go and try.
Wow, thank you. I don't know how that is, but there you go. Krishna's mercy. Didn't know you had that experience. It's nice to hear it. But thank you for the interview.
Oh, there he is.
Yes. It was fun. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. So next week, we're back on Tuesday at 6:30 on Facebook and YouTube. We have a devotee named Vaishnavi, all the way from America, who is a healer, an energy healer, and she's going to talk about her story in Krishna consciousness and everything that she does. So we're looking forward to that, to meeting her. I'd like to thank Karunesvari and Amanda for today, for the show. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. So we're going to sign off now. And Karunesvari, I'll see you Sunday, hopefully, at the market.
Hope so. Let's hope for good weather.
Yeah. Hope for good weather.
Hi. Haribo.
All right, Haribo. See you, everyone.
Everyone has a story to tell. Shining a light on stories that uplift us, that change us, that inspire us. The Yogi Hour. Listen, be inspired.